Hey, remember this guy? Remember this guy? I mean, surely you remember this guy. Or if not, you might remember this. It's Deltarune, baby. Almost 10 years ago now, Toby Fox made a cool thing. And then almost 7 years ago, he released the first chapter of another cool thing. Now, if you're like me, hearing those numbers made you want to go take a cold shower and think long and hard about the passage of time, marching on endlessly, leaving us behind to go, what do you mean 2015 wasn't 5 years ago? But on a positive note, chapters 3 and 4 of Deltarune are set to release this year, the year of our Lord 2025. Whether that means tomorrow or it means December 31st, we're just gonna have to wait and see. In the meantime though, I don't know about you, but I need a refresher. Obviously I can't speak for anyone else, but I know that when I was younger I was absolutely ravenous about release dates and the dreaded wait for new content in a series I cared about. But I kinda grew out of it, and in the 4 years since chapter 2 of Deltarune released, I've just forgotten quite a lot of stuff that I used to know. Important stuff, the things that I want to be on the lookout for in the next 2 chapters. In its place I just have vague memories of things that are maybe sort of important. This friendly looking young man is probably important, isn't he? What was the deal with these guys again? Do I really need to find an egg somewhere so that the main character doesn't die? The problem is, while I let all of my Deltarune knowledge fade into obscurity, a whole lot of people on the internet certainly didn't. And so when I went to refresh myself on bits and pieces from the game online, most of the videos and posts work off a huge amount of assumed knowledge. You're just supposed to know a lot of this stuff. And it's not like Toby Fox has been quiet in that interim period either. I'm just finding out now there was a sweepstakes run by Spamton full of important information. Not to mention all the snippets of content from future chapters he's been sharing in these Deltarune update newsletters. So today let's talk about Deltarune. We'll very quickly recap the story so far, so what actually happened in Undertale and Deltarune's first 2 chapters. We'll talk about everything we know about chapters 3 and 4 thanks to teasers and updates shared by Toby Fox over the past couple years, and we'll dive back into some of the game's biggest mysteries so far, including some of the loose threads you might have missed on a first playthrough. By the time we're done, with any luck, this primer should jog my memory as well as yours, so that when there's Gaster shenanigans or some guy called Mike shows up, we'll have a chance of understanding what the hell is actually going on. But before we get started, and I feel like this should be absurdly obvious, but this video is going to contain spoilers for Undertale and for Deltarune's first 2 chapters. If you haven't played Undertale or Deltarune but you want to at some point, you probably shouldn't be watching this video. But I'm not your dad, as far as you know anyway, so do as you please. So to start off, I think we should head back to Undertale very quickly. You can rest assured I'm not going to waste your time with a laborious recap of everything that happens in the game, but I do want to make sure we're starting on the right foot here. As we'll talk about later, Undertale's fingerprints are very visible on Deltarune, and Toby Fox even refers to Deltarune as Undertale's parallel story in the game's Steam description. So let's make sure we remember the broad strokes of what went on in that game first. So, what happened in Undertale? A long time ago there was a war between humans and monsters. Humans won this war thanks to their superior souls? Don't think too hard about it. They decide to banish all monsters underground, sealing them below the surface with a magic spell, so the monsters build a civilization down there. A long time passes, although it's unclear how long, and this loser falls down a hole in the mountain and finds themselves in the underground, looking for a way to return home to the surface. They make their way through the underground, meeting a cast of lovable characters along the way, and find out that the only way to pass through the magic barrier sealing monsters underground is to kill a monster, take their soul, and use it with their human soul to pass through. This loser, named Frisk, makes some decisions that roughly result in 3 potential endings, depending on how the player chose to play the game. In the neutral ending, Frisk takes the soul of Asgore, the Underground's king, and presumably leaves the underground, returning to the surface alone. Beloved Tumblr Sexy Man Sans calls and gives an update on what's happened in the underground since Frisk left. This changes depending on the choices the player made, but the rough outline remains the same. Frisk dips, and the rest of the monsters just sort of try to figure out what to do now that their king is gone. In the true pacifist ending, we find out that this flower, who has just sort of had bad vibes the entire game, is actually the reincarnation of Toriel and Asgore's son Asriel. They had no idea what to name their son, so they just kind of smashed their names together. Anyway, Asriel and his adopted human sibling Kara died after the latter successfully pulled a prank gone wrong, which included eating poisonous flowers, merging souls with Asriel, and returning to the surface, successfully freaking the fuck out of a bunch of humans, leading them to kill Asriel too. The flower absorbs a whole bunch of human souls and turns back into Asriel, and with the power of hopes and/or dreams, Frisk beats him. He turns back into this small goat boy, and everyone else gets their soul back, finally leaving the underground to a brighter future, or whatever. And finally, in the genocide ending, Frisk kills pretty much every monster they encounter. They're progressively possessed, or maybe just joined by Kara, the first human who fell into the underground, Asriel's sibling. Kara is long dead, but tells us that the determination needed to complete this route to kill almost every monster in the underground was enough to summon them. After a fun jump scare, the player hands over Frisk's soul to Kara for unclear purposes, and that's that. So that's the broad strokes of Undertale's narrative. There's obviously a lot more going on in the game, as I'm sure you know, but for our purposes here, a whistle-stop tour through the key plot points is all we really need. And speaking of which, what happened in Deltarune's first 2 chapters anyway? According to the game's Steam page, this is Undertale's parallel story. We play as Kris, Toriel's adopted child who bears a striking resemblance to Kara. They live in the very imaginatively named Hometown. Yes, they named their town Hometown, and it's populated largely by familiar faces from Undertale. At school one day, Kris and their bully-turned-bestie Susie find themselves in a so-called dark world after walking into a pretty spacious storage closet. This dark world is filled with characters brought to life from inanimate objects from the real world, or the light world, where the game started. Kris and Susie meet this goat boy Ralsei, a not very subtle anagram of Asriel, and he shares a prophecy. There's a delicate balance between the light world, or the real world, and the dark world, such as the one that we see here. If that balance is ruined, Earth will be destroyed. And unfortunately, someone has been going around creating dark fountains, bringing these dark worlds to life around Hometown, threatening that balance. The prophecy states that 3 heroes, a human, a monster, and a prince, will appear to seal these dark fountains and, quote, banish the angels' heaven, which, yes, sounds like nonsense, it kind of is. A new dark fountain has appeared recently on the horizon and is threatening this balance between light and dark, so Kris, Susie, and Ralsei journey through the dark world to seal the fountain. They return to the light world and they head home. Kris goes to sleep until they fall out of bed, chuck their soul, which is being controlled by the player, into a bird cage, and pose threateningly in the middle of the big old Deltarune in their bedroom. The next day, in Chapter 2, Kris and Susie find a dark world in the local library and jump into it, ready to go and seal another fountain. Hijinks ensue alongside their classmates Noelle and Birdley, who accidentally found their way into the dark world, and this fountain is sealed too. Susie joins Kris for a sleepover at their house, and after ripping out their soul once again, Kris slashes Toriel's tires, waits for everyone to fall asleep, and then creates a dark fountain in the living room. And cliffhanger. There you go, I think that was pretty quick. We'll obviously be delving into some of the specifics from the first 2 chapters throughout the video, but hopefully that's jogged your memory of the basic sequence of events if, like me, you haven't played the game since 2021. With that out of the way, how about Chapter 3? It may not be out yet, but there's actually quite a lot that we know about it. We'll mainly be talking about the theme of the chapter's dark world and some of the characters that we'll encounter. But if you're not interested and you'd like to go into it completely blind, I don't blame you at all. Just skip past this section, should be a timestamp on screen, hopefully, if I've done my job correctly. There you go. So starting right where we left off, we can assume the chapter will start in the dark world Kris just created. In the same way that Noelle and Birdley joined us during the dark world portion of Chapter 2, Toriel will likely fill a similar role here. And since Toriel called the police to report the slashed tires, and Kris left the front door open, many people have suggested that Undyne, Napstablook, or maybe both will also join us in the Dark World for this chapter. If you speak to Undyne in Chapter 1 or 2, you have the option of trying to tell her about the Dark Worlds, and she'll laugh it off, so this may have been a way of setting up her appearance in Chapter 3. Okay, so fine, we'll be in a dark world and hijinks will ensue. That's to be expected. But what is Chapter 3's Dark World going to be based on? As we've seen in the previous chapters, Dark Worlds are generally themed around the objects in the room that they're made in. In this case, it's a pretty safe bet to assume the Chapter 3 Dark World will be based around linear TV. And we actually have quite a lot of info confirming this assumption, mostly thanks to 2022's Spamton Sweepstakes. If you missed it like I did, Toby Fox held a charity auction back in 2022, raising money for the charity Child's Play, which provides toys and games for children's hospitals. It was all themed around Spamton on this fantastically 90s website, and it really went off the rails in some places.
Tastes like fresh. Yeah, fresh, Beepus.
The sweepstakes as a whole are their own fascinating rabbit hole, with lots of interesting tidbits and secrets that aren't related to what I'm going to talk about here. If you're interested, this video by the channel 2 Left Thumbs has a pretty detailed rundown of everything from the event. And the site is, as far as I can tell, fully archived at deltarune.com/sweepstakes, so you can always go and take a look through it for yourself. There are some fun secrets in there, some with actual narrative implications, and some of it just for fun. As an aside, it's always funny to see the random stuff people decide to take seriously with events like this. Large swaths of the whole thing are explicitly not canon, or they don't even present themselves as dubiously canonical, but I've definitely noticed a reluctance from some fans to accept obviously irrelevant info, jokes, and references at face value, and instead search for deeper meaning everywhere. Which is how you get stuff like this on the Deltarune fandom wiki, where one of the first things listed under lore reveals is Spamton likes to call Pippis the boys. Truly groundbreaking stuff there. But that said, for our purposes, there are actually some very interesting secrets hidden below the surface of the sweepstakes, stuff we can actually infer from. The whole site is broadly a reference to the website Superbad, now a time capsule of strange 90s internet art, where each page features its own thoroughly weird artwork, as well as links that draw you deeper and deeper into a sort of maze of weirdness. It's pretty cool, and it's worth checking out too. The sweepstakes similarly draw you into a maze, clicking through random links hidden on various pages, and there are a few notable ones that can shed some light on Chapter 3's Dark World. Here's a particularly interesting one at deltarune.com/RAMB, or RAMB. We've got a completely empty black void, while the tab reads, "Where could this be?" Clicking on the door brings us here. This is the green room, according to the tab, which fits in well with our presumed TV theme. For anyone that doesn't know, a green room is a room for performers to relax or get ready before a performance. I've only ever known it in the context of theatre or live music, but I don't see why it couldn't apply here. It's also much bigger than any green room I've seen, but it has a couple of couches, a bar, a vending machine, there's these wires coming down from the ceiling, probably a rider here, so it all seems to check out. And this same image of the green room was also shared in the September 2022 Deltarune status update, alongside a song with the flavor text, "Relax and enjoy a world of cutting-edge entertainment," once again tacitly confirming the TV theme. More interesting than the room itself though is the doors. Each one is clickable and they lead to their own pages. Starting west, clicking this door brings us to deltarune.com/weather, with the sprites for 2 new characters, potentially enemies. When you click on them, you get this, which is just fantastic. It's strangely mesmerizing. There's nothing else on this page, but we do get some more info about them in a Deltarune newsletter. The Winter 2024 newsletter had these randomized Valentine's cards from various Toby Fox characters. You can refresh the website to see quite a few of them, but from what I've read, there are a few that would only appear in the version sent out to people on the email list. That includes this one, featuring our weather characters from the sweepstakes. It features new artwork of the pair alongside their names. On the right is presumably La Nino, since his face is shaped like a crescent moon, and on the left is presumably El Nina, since she appears to be based on a cloud. Their names are of course a reference to the weather patterns El Nino and La Nina, with the pronouns swapped around for some reason. Their actual role in Chapter 3 is unclear, although it's of course notable that they fit neatly into the linear TV theme once again, assuming they're inspired by weather reports. I would also wager they're most likely enemies, since this animation on the sweepstakes website looks like an attack to me. Heading back to the green room, we can see another Chapter 3 enemy when we head through the northern door, which takes us to deltarune.com/changing room. It's a black screen with a shower curtain, and when clicking on it, we get this little freak, putting a sock on and then getting scared and blushing. Occasionally, when clicking the shower curtain, you get this tiny lancer instead, who will lead you to this masterpiece. And if you click on this character before the shower curtain is closed again, you're brought to deltarune.com/shadowmen, which shows a fight with two of them, where Kris, Susie, and Ralsei put on these strange exaggerated gangster costumes and shoot hearts at them to literally knock their socks off. During their attack, one of them shoots a Tommy gun, while the other one plays the saxophone. Admittedly, I can't think of a neat way to fit these guys into the TV theme, but I think we can expect to see them somewhere in Chapter 3. And if we head back to the September 2022 Deltarune status update, we have a little gif of one of them playing the saxophone on stage. Very cute. Back to the green room one last time, and in the eastern door we're brought to deltarune.com/TV. There's nothing else on this page, and the TV itself doesn't do anything to my knowledge, although apparently it's a GIF. But it does once again act as a reminder that the TV is going to play an important role in the next chapter. And speaking of which, deltarune.com/damnyoutenor. This is another secret page from the sweepstakes. It has that same picture of a TV from the Dreamer living room, except hastily crossed out in red with what looks like the spray paint brush from MS Paint. There's a message below from Spamton which reads, "That damn boob tube," which, just as an aside, has completely different connotations in British English and American English. You're the one that should be having a refreshing night's sleep in the recycling bin. Everything is his. Everything is his fault. Pay. Everyone is going to pay 5 easy payments of $9.99 until they're all in the disposal area begging for my Everyone. Everyone except, and then in black text hidden below, Mike. So this page brings our focus onto two characters that we can absolutely expect to be important in Chapter 3, that is Mike and Tenor. So if we start with Tenor, it's presumably short for antenna, we can see a couple of them right there. We can assume that this is our TV character with the toothy smile from the end of Chapter 2. As far as I can tell, this is pretty much the only concrete info that we've actually gotten about Tenor. Who they are, what their role will be, it's all pretty vague. But there are a couple other references to Tenor from both the sweepstakes and from Chapter 2 that are worth taking a look at. First of all, in Spamton's Q&A from the sweepstakes, the user ListSpeedVs asks Spamton, "Who is Mike?" eyes emoji, and Spamton replies, "F*** you. Are you one of that Cathode's crew? You guys know nothing about Mike, nothing, and that's the way it's gonna stay. You leave him out of this." Now, if I'm completely honest, I personally see this as a reference to David Bowie's character in Twin Peaks' Fire Walk With Me.
Well, now, I'm not going to talk about Judy. In fact, we're not going to talk about Judy at all. We're going to keep her out of it.
Gordon?
Aside from that, the cathode here is a reference to a cathode ray tube used in a CRT TV, which Tenor appears to be. And while the actual information that we get from this is pretty slim, we're slowly starting to see a dynamic form between Spamton, Tenor, and Mike. And we'll talk about Mike in just a second, but there are a couple more small things I wanted to point out that relate back to Tenor, in case you needed another heap of foreshadowing about TVs. It comes up a few times in the Spamton Value Network, which is in itself a parody of TV infomercials, where Spamton encourages people to destroy their TV.
I'll smash my TV with a battering ram. I'll kill my TV with a battering ram. I'll brush my TV with mayonnaise and slimes. I'll crush my TV for its horrible crimes. I don't need a TV anymore. Spamton is here, and he I adore!
And of course, he has this sprite in Chapter 2 where his eyes are replaced by TV static, and he has a couple mentions of TVs in both his dialogue and his battle dialogue as Spamton Neo. So we've slowly got a picture coming into focus, but what about Mike? Well, if you played Chapter 2 and you have a particularly good memory, you might remember the name. Spamton mentions Mike, to my knowledge, only twice in passing. Here, when you ask about friends, Spamton says, "Me? Friends? Yeah. Kris, you and me are already friend request accepted. We don't need anyone else. We don't need easels or CRTs." Note the TV reference there. "We don't need any man, woman, or child at half price. We don't need Mike." Mike. "Kris, don't believe anything you see on TV. The man's a criminal, I tell you, a criminal." And then again in the Spamton Neo fight, after beating him, he'll say, "Are you getting all this, Mike? I'm finally gonna be a big shot." So, who is Mike? As pointed out frequently online, it's most likely supposed to be a reference to Mike Ditka, who did an ad for Big Shot Soda in 1997, a year that seems to crop up a lot in relation to Spamton.
That's it. It's time for a big shot.
Oh yeah, y'all, we do need a big shot.
We need a big shot on our side.
We need a big shot. We need a big shot.
You need a big shot? I got your big shot right here. We got 12 delicious flavors, and you'll love them all.
Savor Center has all your big shot tailgate party needs at prices too low to mention.
Hi, so I wrote this video before I actually watched the Mike Ditka Big Shot Soda commercials, and wow, I mean, I really want to talk about this. It's very authentically 90s in a way that's sort of indescribable, and it really goes off the rails for some reason. We started with a guy reading the paper, and in the space of a few seconds, we reach Mike Ditka kicking down the door from a smoke-filled room and yelling at me about soda. Look at the way he points down at you when he says, "You'll love 'em all."
And you'll love them all.
Is that a threat? Did you set this building on fire? And hey, was that yassified David Schwimmer? None of this is relevant to Deltarune at all, but I just couldn't in good conscience show you that commercial without taking the time to acknowledge how deeply, deeply weird it is. Anyway, back to what I was going to say. And while this is absolutely an intentional reference, it can't be the entire picture. Mike is referenced again in the sweepstakes. We can extrapolate from Spamton's vague references that they were once friends and Tenna is looking for him, but that's about it. I would also put forward that Mike is probably short for microphone. It seems absurdly unlikely that there would be a guy named Mike, short for Michael, in the world of Deltarune, where it's already rare to find a character with a name that isn't some kind of pun or play on words. It also fits right in with the TV theme, where you would expect to see a microphone. Tumblr user Fallen Tower expands on this idea in quite an interesting way, suggesting that Tenna, a TV, and Mike, a microphone, are representing the competition between TV and radio. You know, video killed the radio star and all. I think this is quite a fun interpretation. Another suggestion that I've seen floated around is that Mike may be Chapter 3's main boss. In Chapter 1, Jevil mentions Queen in his dialogue, only for her to become the next chapter's main boss. It's much too early to know for certain if this is a trend, but if it were, then it would make sense for Spamton to make a reference to the next chapter's boss. I'm not really a fan of this interpretation personally. I don't really see how Tenna would make sense as a secret boss or a secondary character in the chapter's story, but it's certainly possible. So that's everything hefty that we know about Chapter 3, but there are a couple smaller things to very quickly mention. In case the TV theme somehow seems unlikely to you, the Winter 2024 Undertale/Deltarune newsletter has an interview with the concept artist Gigi, which includes these two wonderful pieces of art. It doesn't get more obvious than TV time. And cowboys? Yeehaw? I have no idea what's going on with the cowboy stuff. It all started in the Spamton sweepstakes through a link that takes you to bluebubble.rodeo. Here we see Kris and Susie in cowboy outfits, and we get a satisfying whip cracking sound when you click on them. The tab's title proclaims, "Get ready for 2 minutes of mildly entertaining shootout action." And then in the Spring 2023 newsletter, Fox shared the same cowboy sprites, except this time he says, "This segment is in danger of being cancelled." Seriously, one of the only segments that we teased may end up being cancelled? Well, that's just how cowboy shows go, I guess. It's hard to tell how serious this is. Can a segment truly be in danger of being cancelled? Surely it's either cancelled or it isn't. Some people online have interpreted this as a narrative hint. We're in a TV world, and since audience interest in westerns has long since plummeted, it features a cowboy show which is at risk of being cancelled. For me, I feel like this may be reading a little too deep into it, but there's really no way of knowing for now. What I can tell you is this: when Chapter 3 releases, there either will be a cowboy scene, or there won't be. It'll definitely be one of those two. So that's pretty much everything that we know about Chapter 3. We've got some hints towards the chapter's major characters, we've seen a couple of enemies, we know what the Dark World will be themed about, and we even know about a 2-minute scene that may or may not be scrapped. You might be thinking, oh boy, I wonder what Chapter 4 might have in store. Well, I'm thinking that too, because comparatively we know next to nothing about it. Fox has shared a few screenshots in the newsletters over the past couple years, which you can see on screen at the moment. They show us some very small snippets of locations or moments, mostly in the light world. It's all pretty neat, but there's no hints towards what might happen narratively in the chapter, or anything to really talk about and dig into about Chapter 4, unfortunately. There is one thing for me to very quickly mention. I'm doing this on the fly because this came out after I wrote my script. On Blue Sky, Toby Fox sent out a tweet. He originally said a couple of weeks ago that he's not sure when the next newsletter is actually going to be, so he's trying to give some small status updates as they come. And so he posted this one on the 21st of January. He's giving a sort of just a general update on what's actually going on with both translation and with testing. But he does mention here that as far as testing, one of the testers has said that players will find it very inconvenient that you can't save or load in the light world, and so Toby Fox has decided to add save points in the light world in Chapter 4. Now, I've seen some speculation about what specifically this might mean for the chapter. It's pretty hard to say at the moment. I think some people have taken it maybe a little bit too far by suggesting that it might mean there are battles in the light world, which I don't think is going to be the case. I think more likely the light world section in Chapter 4 is probably just longer, and therefore Toby Fox wants to make sure that players can save and quit, so that players don't have to do this entire section in one sitting and can break it up by saving and quitting when they need to. Moving on then, I'd like to spend the rest of this video delving a little bit deeper into the first 2 chapters of Deltarune. Knowing that we're only 2/7 of the way through the game, there's a vast number of mysteries that we just don't have the answers to yet, but the evidence that exists so far is absolutely fascinating. So if you'll humour me for a little bit longer, I'd like to explore each of these mysteries on screen in a bit more detail. We'll take a look at the evidence we've got so far, and see if we can draw some early conclusions, where things might be headed in the next few chapters, and what to look out for as the story progresses. We'll take a look at the mysterious W.D. Gaster. Undertale fans will absolutely recognise this guy, if for no reason other than the explosion of fan interpretations of who he might be. We'll take a look at his role in Deltarune, how we know he's relevant to this story too, and what that might mean going forward. We'll look at the relationship between Kris and the player. They've ripped their soul out of their body enough times for us to safely conclude that in this story, the player is a separate character. Kris doesn't seem especially happy to be possessed and controlled by us, so we'll take a look at this dynamic and what impact it might have on the story. We'll explore the relationship between Undertale and Deltarune. Their names may be anagrams, but how are they actually linked? It's not a sequel nor a prequel, so what is it exactly? And are the two stories going to intersect? We'll take a look at the Knight, seemingly the game's central antagonist, the one opening these dark fountains around Hometown. What has the game actually told us about the Knight so far? And what are the chances it's Kris anyway? We did watch them open a dark fountain at the end of Chapter 2 after all. The Eggman. There's a shady figure handing out an egg to Kris every chapter. Is it true that you won't survive your teen years without at least one egg? Or is it just a very literal Easter egg? Another anagram for you, we'll take a look at Ralsei and Asriel, the two goat boys with a strange number of parallels. How are they connected? And what's up with all the mysteries surrounding this one? Is he the wholesome fluffy boy we've been led to believe? Or is he hiding something? We'll explore Chapter 2's Weird Route, or Snowgrave as it's sometimes known. Will this alternate route take us to a different ending for the game? Is it even going to continue past Chapter 2? And what does it contribute towards Deltarune's themes and message? And finally, we'll take a look at the Holiday family. That includes Noelle and her dad Rudy, of course, as well as 2 characters that we haven't seen just yet, but may be important for the story going forward. Now, as I'm sure you've noticed, this isn't every mystery Deltarune poses over its first 2 chapters. And what's been left out is stuff I'm still very curious about. What's up with the creepy bunker on the outskirts of Hometown? What's the deal with Onion-san and the weird song they've been hearing coming from the ocean? The list of stuff that we're going to talk about is, in my opinion, the best of both worlds, balancing Deltarune's most important mysteries and the mysteries that I personally think are most interesting or relevant going forward. I'll be sharing my own interpretations of the evidence so far and how I think it can be pieced together, but I'm not a Deltarune prophet by any stretch of the imagination. I have no idea what's coming next. I highly encourage you to take a look at the evidence and build your own interpretations as we go along. And if you disagree with any of my conclusions, feel free to correct me in the comments. Even the most benign opinions about Deltarune will have their detractors. Someone will have an opposing opinion, so just keep in mind that I don't have all the answers and I'm not claiming to either. Hopefully I can shed some light on the shreds of evidence that are scattered across the game, so with any luck both you and I can do one of these, or maybe one of these, when the mysteries progress in the next couple chapters. So let's start with a big one. What is the deal with W.D. Gaster? Well, he's pretty much everywhere, and if you fall too far down the rabbit hole, you'll start seeing him around basically every corner. I have to defer to this video by the channel Misty Sparkles. It's a pretty fantastic breakdown of pretty much all of the evidence we have about Gaster and why he's significant in Deltarune. If you're interested in this topic and really want to find out more, I would definitely recommend checking it out. In the meantime, I'll give my own rundown of the basics. W.D. Gaster is a real fan favourite character, which is baffling when you consider that we don't even know what he looks like. He's very much hidden in the shadows of Undertale, only ever mentioned by NPCs with a very low chance of appearing in your game. Any other information about him is only accessible by manipulating the code to find rooms and other info left behind both intentionally and unintentionally by Toby Fox during production. What we can say for sure about Gaster is that in Undertale, he was the royal scientist before Alphys took over. He built the core, which provides electricity to the underground, and eventually we're told that he fell into his creation, being, quote, shattered across time and space in the process. That's a tough break, but it's not all bad for Dr. Gaster because he's not just lurking in the shadows of Undertale. His fingerprints are all over Deltarune. You may recall that the game's introduction features a mysterious voice that speaks directly to the player, a voice whose dialogue is written and formatted in a way that might be recognizable if you think back. In the run-up to the release of Chapter 1, the official Undertale Twitter account was posting cryptic tweets written and formatted in the exact same way. They say they'd like to show us something we'll find very, very interesting, which may also be recognizable if we go even further back. Completely inaccessible during normal gameplay, only reachable through manipulating the game's code, is Undertale's Entry 17. Its title suggests that it's in line with the notes hidden throughout the True Lab section of Undertale's pacifist route, but it's clearly not written by Alphys like the rest of them. Listed as room_Gaster in the game's code, and written in Wingding's font, presumably what the WD stands for in WD Gaster, it reads, Entry number 17. Dark, darker, yet darker. The darkness keeps growing. The shadows cutting deeper. Photon readings negative. This next experiment seems very, very interesting. What do you two think? So, Entry 17, the cryptic Twitter posts, and Deltarune's intro sequence are all written in this same voice, the voice of Gaster. And while that entry didn't make a whole lot of sense back when it was first discovered, it suddenly sounds a lot more familiar. Darkness growing, shadows cutting deeper, photon readings negative. He's opening a dark fountain, right? Like a Deltarune stab your knife into the ground dark fountain. It should be said that Toby Fox has stated multiple times that a lot of the ideas for Deltarune date back quite a while, even before Undertale. There are lots of connections between the games that are not retroactive, but added with the knowledge that Deltarune was the game that he wanted to make next, the game he's always wanted to make. So with the understanding that dark worlds and dark fountains were a core idea Fox had been thinking about prior to Undertale, this seems like a complete slam dunk to me. He's making a dark fountain. And not to mention that when speaking to the Gaster NPCs in Undertale, they simply tell us that he fell into his creation. And while we might assume they're talking about the core, they don't say that explicitly. And why would the core scatter someone across time and space anyway? It seems incredibly likely that they're talking about a dark fountain. We can also tie Gaster into some of the events within Deltarune too. In Chapter 1, when asking Shorm about Jevil, they'll say, "One day he met a strange someone, and since then, he began to change. He started saying bizarre things that didn't completely make sense, but didn't completely not make sense either. As the court mage, and his only companion, I was forced to lock him away. Since that time, the strange words he said have stuck inside my cotton, and my view of this world has become darker, yet darker." Darker yet darker, huh? So, Jevil met a strange someone, and then began to change. Sound like anyone else we know? What about Chapter 2's secret boss, Spamton? We're told he met a mysterious stranger who helped him out until he suddenly disappeared, leaving Spamton to go crazy. We're told Spamton left his phone off the hook, and when someone went to check on him, all they could hear is, quote, garbage noise, which we hear too when trying to make a phone call in the dark world. But it's not just garbage noise, it's the noise that plays alongside entry 17. Trying to talk about this just makes me feel nuts. But while it's obscure and it's a little bit esoteric, both Jevil and Spamton connect back to Gaster when you start digging into their stories, trying to find out why they are the way they are. So you can find Gaster in lots of nooks and crannies in Deltarune. He's in the music, he's speaking to us in the intro, and in tweets leading up to the game's release. At this point, he's probably in the walls as we speak. So what does it mean? What is he doing in Deltarune? Well, we know that Toby Fox is once again leaning into metafictional storytelling, arguably even harder than he did in Undertale. We've seen time and time again that Kris and the player are separate characters in this narrative. And we'll talk about that more in a moment, but the introduction seems to suggest that the way the player is interfacing with the world of Deltarune and the soul inside of Kris has some connection back to Gaster. Remember those opening lines when you first start the game? Are you there? Are we connected? The player has been brought here for something. What that is and why, we're going to have to wait to find out. In the meantime though, here's a few things you can keep an eye out for in the coming chapters if you want to be ready for any hint of Gaster shenanigans. This is Gaster's theme. We've already heard it in a handful of places in Deltarune, but it will assuredly show up again. Toby Fox is absolutely fantastic when it comes to leitmotif, and you can spot these sorts of connections between the themes for various characters all over his work if you're paying close enough attention. Keep an ear out for it in future tracks. Aside from that, you can be on the lookout for text written in his style from the intro, as well as the less subtle Wingdings font we know to associate with him. We may see posts on social media written in this style once again as the release date for chapters 3 and 4 get closer. We have these two sprites from Undertale, which could potentially be what Gaster looks like, although neither one is confirmed and they could both easily be unrelated. This one though is particularly popular with fans. And of course, he's associated with these grayscale versions of Undertale characters, who give us some of the only solid background that we've got on the man himself. So we may see this crop up again in future chapters. Whew, so that's a big one out of the way. So what's the deal with Kris and the player? As I already alluded to, it's pretty clear that you, sitting at your computer playing Deltarune, and Kris, the character you're controlling, are not one and the same. In any given game, you would expect that by controlling the main character, you're being invited to suspend your disbelief for a while and become the little guy on screen. Your decisions are their decisions. Subverting this agreement between player and game is not new, of course, and metafiction, fiction that is aware that it's fiction, has been around for hundreds of years. But it's still very much fertile ground in video games, and Deltarune makes it clear straight away that it intends to play with those ideas. At the end of chapter 1, Kris rips out their soul and acts on their own accord, separate from what we might want them to do, and they do it again in chapter 2. We can make decisions Kris isn't particularly happy with. Characters comment on how Kris seems different, is acting differently. This character, who is supposedly pretty good at playing piano, is terrible when we're controlling them. The player is an active character in the game's story. We're not just controlling someone who is. And the dynamic between the player and Kris is only going to get more fraught as the game progresses. In Chapter 2, Spamton has this line: "It seems, after all, I couldn't be anything more than a simple puppet. But you three, you're strong. With a power like that, maybe you three can break your own strings." We've already seen Kris fighting the player's influence, and it seems as though Ralsei is able to do something similar, changing the player's perspective so we can't listen in on his conversation with Kris. We'll talk a little more about the player and what Toby Fox might be building towards when we talk about the weird route, but in the meantime, here's some things to be on the lookout for in the next couple chapters. This is almost certainly going to happen again. I don't think that needs clarification. Kris will continue to find opportunities to act independently from the player, and we may find it harder to make them do what we want them to do as the game goes on. Those are the moments to look for, where our actions and intentions don't match what Kris decides to do. We didn't make Kris create this dark fountain, for example, and that will certainly cause problems in the next chapter. We're going to have to find the fountain and seal it, so if Susie or Ralsei find out Kris opened it by themselves, that may cause some friction. It's also worth keeping an eye out for characters who bypass Kris and speak to the player directly. And, of course, the puppet analogy may come back at some point too. It was particularly relevant for Spamton, a literal puppet, but there's no better way to describe the way the player is literally pulling Kris's strings, so I would be on the lookout for those parallels. Hey, what's the deal with Undertale and Deltarune? This one has been a real source of contention for fans of both games for pretty much as long as Deltarune has existed. And even now, as Toby Fox's direction for the game starts to come into focus, people continue to disagree about how much of an influence the two games will have on each other. And if the game's biggest fans can't fully agree on what's actually going on here, I'm not sure how we're supposed to. So let's try to break it down. How are the two games connected? Obviously they are connected in some nebulous capacity at a minimum. Their names are an anagram of each other, and the Deltarune from which the game gets its name already exists in Undertale. It's the name of this symbol and its associated prophecy. Undertale characters are aplenty in Hometown, and even some of the new characters seem to link back to Undertale anyway. The game's Steam description calls it the next adventure in the Undertale series, and Undertale's parallel story, but that's still pretty vague. I remember playing Chapter 1 when it first released in 2018, and being really stumped by this, despite Toby Fox's message to fans after the game came out essentially being, please don't think too hard about it. We can say for certain the two games aren't in the same timeline. This is neither a prequel nor a sequel to Undertale's story. The key piece of evidence I always come back to is Asriel. We haven't seen him yet in the game, but we're told he and Kris grew up together and he left Hometown to go to university. In Undertale, he dies as a child. The only way for him to be alive and university age, living on the surface, is for this to be an alternate timeline, a world with the same characters but a completely different sequence of events. We can assume that the war between humans and monsters we're told about in Undertale's intro either never happened, or that monsters won instead, judging by the noticeable lack of humans aside from Kris. If you're still unsure what this all actually means, here's Toby Fox's own clarification. I will say that basically what you're seeing here is not the world of Undertale. Undertale's world and ending are the same as however you left them. If everyone was happy in your ending, the people in the Undertale world will still be happy. So please don't worry about those characters and that world. It will remain untouched. To rephrase that, Deltarune's world is a different one, with different characters that have lived different lives. A whole new story will happen. So they're connected, but not too connected. Deltarune is its own story with its own unique characters and events. There are some fun references back to Undertale, like Sans shop clearly just being Grillby's, and this reference back to the word search Papyrus gives you in Snowdin. It's all very inconsequential. They're references for people who played and loved Undertale, without tying the games too closely together. In other words, it's mostly not worth worrying about, although that won't stop people from making very convoluted theories connecting the two games together. So in that case, in the next couple chapters, it's certainly worth looking out for these smaller references. There will be more of them. If you're hoping for the two narratives to intersect in some way, be on the lookout for Gaster as mentioned earlier. He may be the only way in which the two games are concretely connected outside of smaller references. And while we wait, it's not a bad idea to refresh yourself with a fresh playthrough of Undertale. The experience of making those connections, even with small and otherwise irrelevant references, is a lot of fun, and it's a lot easier when Undertale is fresh in your mind. Okay, what's the deal with the Knight? The Knight is the person who has been opening the dark fountains around Hometown. That's kind of all we know. Their motivations, their appearance, all complete unknowns for the moment. All we've got is speculation. And boy, is there a lot of speculation. I can't think of a topic that has so fervently whipped up the Deltarune community like the Knight. Because the information is so limited, there are very few characters we can say with 100% certainty are not the Knight. And as a result, people have taken that as license to speculate about basically every character ever being the Knight. Is it Gaster? Is it Kris? Is it Alvin? Is it Papyrus? Believe me, there are a shocking amount of people who have put their whole faith into that last one. I'll warn you now, there is no clear frontrunner in this race, so let's take a look at the minimal evidence that we've got so far. In Chapter 1, we get a lot of words that boil down to the Knight created the fountain. Shorm tells us that a strange knight appeared and 3 of the land's 4 kings were locked away, leaving this guy and his son to take power. He notably doesn't say that the knight locked them away, just that it happened at the same time. And when you speak to the locked up kings at the end of the chapter, they use similarly vague terms. Once all 4 of us ruled together, but when the knight arrived, everything changed. So, not a lot of help there. King also talks about the knight, but just with vague gesturing. He talks about a new purpose, blanketing the world with darkness, seemingly attributing this to the Knight. But we don't get any sense of what their relationship even was, and as far as we can tell, the Knight never actually told him any of this. He just took his own liberties in interpreting what happened, without communication from the Knight. And we get a similar sequence of events in Chapter 2. The Knight, now the Roaring Knight apparently, sweet new title, created the Dark World and peaced out. Queen has a similar interpretation to King, that with more dark fountains, which we're told any old lightener can make and shown the process of doing so, the darkness will simply spread and it'll be a good time for everyone in the Dark Worlds. When Ralsei explains the roaring to Queen, she says, "I was just guessing based off the Knight's actions." So that's all great, but it basically puts us back at square one. The Knight made the fountains, and both King and Queen decided to use it as an opportunity to spread the Dark Worlds further, for their own purposes, not because the Knight told them it was a good idea. Of course, the ending of Chapter 2 certainly raises some questions. We see Kris open a dark fountain. Surely that means Kris is the Knight then, correct? I was pretty willing to believe it when I finished Chapter 2 for the first time, but coming back to it now, I'm not so sure. We have this vague villain with unclear motivations, built up by other characters to be mysterious and shady, only for their identity to be revealed 2 chapters in? Doesn't that seem like a bit of an anticlimax? The specific circumstances for the first 2 fountains, and whether it's even logistically possible for Kris to have made them, have been litigated endlessly by the community. But we've seen what happens when Kris acts on their own without the cooperation of the player. Moving is laborious, clumsy, strained. Is it realistic to think that Kris could do this for an extended amount of time to head out and make a dark fountain in the case of Chapter 2? And it's still unclear when Chapter 2's fountain was even created, despite some insistence in the community that it isn't. Birdley and Noelle are behind the desk with their books laid out when they wake up after the fountain has been sealed, while Kris and Susie are standing in front of the doorway a few steps into the room. This, to me, suggests that they were in the room when the fountain was created, since otherwise they should be at the doorway alongside the other 2. This is such a hot topic with Deltarune fans that I'm afraid I've opened a can of worms by even weighing in on it. So to be clear, none of this means Kris isn't the Knight. I just have a lot of questions about the plausibility of that outcome, and those questions just can't be answered with the information that we have now. The only other information that we've gotten about the Knight in-game comes from the 2 secret bosses, Jevel and Spamton. Jevel tells us that the hand of the Knight is drifting forward, and a nightmare will awaken in your hearts in the shadow of the Knight's hand. Meanwhile, Spamton just kind of freaks out when you ask about the Knight, although he opens with, "Speaking of communion." This obviously draws parallels to Deltarune's religious imagery, especially the church and its related characters. But since religion seems to be important for a lot of characters in Hometown, it doesn't feel like it brings us any closer to narrowing down the list of suspects. So after looking over all the evidence, we don't really have much, do we? We have exactly one character who can genuinely be considered a candidate, since we've actually seen them open a dark fountain, but the evidence is still shaky in their case. So what should we look out for in the next chapters? Well, first of all, I'm very interested to see the way that pretty much everyone interacts with Kris in Chapter 3. This should give us a better sense of their plausibility as the Knight. Will Darkness explicitly recognize Kris as the Knight? What will Ralsei and Susie think of Kris opening a fountain? The way these characters react and how they deal with that information will almost certainly tell us whether Kris is the Knight or not. And going forward, conversations with bosses and secret bosses in each chapter might finally shed some light on the Knight's motivations, why they're opening these fountains. Since the evidence is so slim for such an otherwise important character, any and all references will be notable as the game progresses. Okay, here's a fun one. What's the deal with the Eggman? So if you haven't heard, because it's highly unlikely that you stumbled across this organically, there's a guy handing out eggs in the Dark World in both chapters. He's in a room with a very small chance of appearing when walking between these two screens in Chapter 1 and these two screens in Chapter 2. Kris enters alone, and when interacting, the man will offer Kris an egg. It plays out the exact same way both times. You can use the egg, but it doesn't do anything. However, you can take it back to the light world, and it leads to some fun interactions around town in certain places, like Asgore's fridge and in the shop. You can also take a look at Temmie's hard-boiled egg in the classroom, and it will count how many eggs you've collected so far. So cool, a fun Easter egg, a meta joke by virtue of being about collecting literal eggs. Right? Well, the experts in the Deltarune community think it goes much deeper. Lancer tells us that we won't get through our teen years without at least one egg. That must mean that missing the eggs will give you the bad ending and terrible things will happen. Everything is fucked without the eggs. I'm sure you can tell I find this whole thing pretty silly. Some people believe this all comes back to Gaster, since Undertale's Mystery Man sprite, which is commonly believed to be him, appears in a similar way, hidden between two areas, low chance of appearing, and they're both referred to as man. But that's pretty much where the parallels end. We've already discussed the ways Gaster is all over Deltarune, so it'd be pretty strange for his entire role to just be handing eggs to Kris. But hey, anything's possible, and this is one secret that people online are especially rabid about, so I thought I'd give it a mention. This same process will likely repeat again in the next 2 chapters. There will probably be a small chance of finding a room where you can get an egg and receive some fun light world dialogue as a reward. But I think that's about it. Okay, moving swiftly on from egg talk, what's the deal with Asriel and Ralsei? If the Undertale Deltarune anagram wasn't enough for you, Toby Fox didn't think so either. I'm sure you've noticed by now that Ralsei is an anagram for Asriel. They're also both goat boys. The two are clearly meant to be connected, but how? They're obviously not the same person, since Asriel is currently at university and Ralsei is, well, a Darkner. He should be based on an inanimate object somewhere in the light world. Plus, wouldn't Kris recognize their brother immediately? And if Ralsei was Asriel and trying to do a secret identity, why would he shuffle his name around instead of, coming up with a new name? It's all quite strange, and it's hard to figure out what we're meant to believe. In this scene here, Noelle seemingly notices the similarities between Ralsei and Asriel, but we never see Kris make any indication they've noticed the obvious parallel themselves. While we are mostly in full control of Kris, there are occasions throughout the game where they're able to emote and otherwise react to situations without the player's input. I find it really strange that Kris doesn't seem to react to this at all. And to be clear, I'm not building up to a point here, I genuinely don't know what's going on. It's another patented Deltarune situation where, with the information that we've got so far, no answer seems especially compelling. But there is one piece of dialogue that might give us some direction though. In Chapter 1, Toriel says, "Remember when you were little, you asked when your horns were going to grow in. So we bought you that headband with the little red horns on it. Oh, you wore it for months. Whatever happened to it?" Ralsei's horns aren't red, they're more pink, but some have theorized that there's a connection there. Ralsei could be based on Kris' perception of them eventually growing up to look like their adopted family, particularly like their older brother Asriel. It may be notable that the headband is missing, and it could explain exactly what light world object Ralsei is supposed to be based on. It's also worth pointing out that, even ignoring the parallels to Asriel, Ralsei seems to have a lot of secrets. How did he know Kris and Susie's names? They never introduced themselves. Why is he seemingly the only Darkener able to visit other Dark Worlds? How does he know so much about the Light World, let alone the Prophecy? Why is he one of the very few characters to break the fourth wall on multiple occasions? And why the hell is he so cute? You can interpret this in many different ways. Ralsei might be intentionally hiding information from the player. He may be hiding information from Kris and Susie too. We may have reason to doubt what he says about the Prophecy, since we have no source other than him to rely on. His parallels to Asriel might be a way of endearing himself to Kris, trying to look like their brother who they can't spend time with anymore, far away at university. He might be endearing himself to the player. Everyone's heartstrings were pulled by Asriel in Undertale. Are we being lulled into a false sense of security by what appears to be a fluffy goat boy who is in fact scheming behind the scenes? It's hard to say, but if we think back a little, haven't we seen something like this before? Goat boy, false sense of security, gives a tutorial. It's Flowey. I'm talking about Flowey. In Undertale, we're greeted in the underground by this unassuming and particularly smiley flower. Look at those pixels. And he surely just wants to help us. He says some lines that ring a bell and oh, he's already betrayed us. Now, we've obviously had a lot longer to become attached to Ralsei. He's been turned into a marketable plushie multiple times, so maybe there's a perfectly rational explanation for all of this. But I'm going to be keeping it in mind going into the next chapters, just so I can be on guard for what might come next. Going forward, I'm very interested to see how Toriel reacts with Ralsei in Chapter 3. Will she recognize the similarities to her own son and point them out? What will Ralsei's reaction to Toriel be? Someone who objectively looks a lot like him too. And of course, the more we learn about the Prophecy, about the connection between the light and dark world, the more we'll understand about Ralsei's origins. I wouldn't bank on these mysteries being solved in the next 2 chapters, but I do think we'll leave them with a lot more information than we have now. All I'm saying is I don't trust this guy. So, what's the deal with the weird route? This is another easy one to miss, especially if you just played Chapter 2 and didn't dig into much about it online. There's an alternate route in Chapter 2 which changes the way the chapter plays out pretty dramatically, and it gives us a potential look at how Fox's interest in the relationship between the player and the game might play out. In the game's files, it's referred to as the Weird Route, and the developers seem to use that name too, although it's more commonly known in the community as Snowgrave. It's all the same thing. It requires some very specific steps which aren't explained or even really hinted at by the game at any point, but essentially the player can lead Kris and Noelle away from the usual sequence of events by backtracking once Noelle is in the party and freezing every enemy with the Ice Shock spell. This changes the chapter dramatically, with the player pushing Noelle out of her comfort zone repeatedly, eventually freezing Birdley, who seems to actually be dead, or thoroughly frozen at the very least, when everyone else wakes up at the end of the chapter. Things end the same way, with Kris opening a fountain in the living room, but it leaves us with a lot of questions. And I think the most pressing is, will this route continue past Chapter 2? The Steam description proudly boasts that the game only has one ending, a statement Fox has made multiple times elsewhere. And indeed, Deltarune is constantly posing itself in opposition to Undertale by reminding the player that their choices don't matter. But here's an alternative route for the chapter where our choices do matter, not just in how we get to the same end goal of sealing the fountain, but how we've affected the characters back in the Light World. Birdley may or may not be dead, jury's still out on that one, but he's not looking too hot. And the interaction with Noelle at the hospital at the end of the chapter is different too. She's not just gotten more confident, but the way she's experienced the day's events is completely different. But having said all that, the way Chapter 3 is set up makes it unlikely for Noelle to join us in the Dark World, which suggests that the weird route in this specific incarnation may not continue for the moment. And that's a compelling reason to think it might not continue at all. It acts as an alternate path for Noelle's character development. Not a pleasant one, but one nonetheless. Noelle's interest in video game secrets and glitches is explored in the Spamton Sweepstakes, where we see a few excerpts from her blog, which might tie into the fact that this hidden alternate route is only possible when Noelle is in the party. And it might just be that this route can continue in a later chapter when she may join the party again. That said, the other, perhaps more important character development in the weird route, as I alluded to earlier, is that of the player. The player's influence over Kris and over the game itself. In a standard playthrough, we're largely following what other characters would like us to do. We're acting out Ralsei's prophecy, joining up as a team, meeting some wacky characters, and closing these dark fountains. This isn't without its problems. Frankly, it seems even in the normal route, Kris isn't too happy with having their body controlled by someone else. But in the weird route, that influence is cranked up. Noelle comments that Kris's voice sounds different, she's hearing the player's voice. We're pushing Kris and Noelle to do things that they clearly don't want to do. Nobody wants this route to happen, not even Toby Fox, who, again, declares that this game only has one ending. We're not supposed to be able to do anything to influence the outcome, according to everything the game tells us. But we do. Whether that means the weird route will continue on past Chapter 3, who knows? But it does suggest that the player's impact will not be negligible on the game's narrative either way, and the theme of the player's influence will surely crop back up. And one last thing before we move on, I would be remiss if I didn't point out the similarities between the weird route and Undertale's genocide route. Both are triggered by killing all of the enemies in a particular area, we encounter a much harder final boss as a result, there's a counter which tells us how many enemies we must defeat, and during the Spamton Neo fight, we even get what could be considered Undertale's signature line, "But nobody came." It seems to me to be a sort of flip side of the same concept. Subverting RPG tropes was one of the core philosophies of Undertale. The morality system was designed for an experienced RPG player to accidentally stumble into a genocide route. Anyone familiar with grinding for XP might do it intentionally, thinking it's the right thing to do, and ultimately finding themselves paying for the consequences of their actions. But while the weird route similarly seems to want to comment on the morality of the player, we have to go out of our way to make it happen. A clueless player almost certainly won't trigger the weird route accidentally, unlike Undertale's genocide route. You might be forgiven for playing Undertale like a traditional RPG, where killing enemies generally won't have negative consequences. But Deltarune is a game for people who played Undertale. You're expected to know about the morality gimmick already. And so you might see the weird route as a kind of test to see if we learned our lesson from Undertale. Will players go out of their way to hurt these characters, despite the path to a happier ending being offered to us on a silver platter? Or are we still so obsessed with seeing all of the possible content the game has to offer, to the point of going out of our way to hurt and torture these characters, just to see what happens? Who knows? If the weird route continues into future chapters, it may not be obvious how to trigger it. But we can rest assured that the internet will find it if it's there. And with that, we only have one topic left to discuss. What's the deal with the Holiday family? Just so we're clear who exactly we're talking about here, this encompasses two characters we've already met, Noelle and her father Rudy, as well as two that we haven't, Noelle's sister Des and their mum. We'll go in reverse order for how much we actually know about these characters, starting with Noelle's mum. It's very commonly believed that she's the town's mayor, so commonly believed it's actually listed on the Deltarune fandom wiki as fact, and while it's not confirmed, it does seem likely. When heading to the town hall, the NPCs tell us that the mayor is an icy person who is constantly very busy and keeps the air conditioning on at full blast at all times. Noelle comments that her mum doesn't like it when she bothers her when she's working, and similarly seems to like the cold. Makes sense for a family of reindeer, I suppose. Plus, they seemingly live in a very expensive house, if their gate is anything to go by anyway. Many people in the community will connect her to this note in Asgore's shop, signed with the letter C, with speculation suggesting that her name might be Carol, putting her in line with the family's festive naming convention. Personally, I'm not sure why the mayor would also necessarily be Asgore's landlord. I don't really see the connection there, but it's not impossible. Personally, I feel like it's probably one or the other, so Noelle's mum is either the mayor or a landlord, particularly Asgore's landlord. But aside from that, that's kind of all that we know about her for the moment, and she's not really referenced anywhere else. Next up is Des, who is a strong second place for the competition of characters we've never seen that people can't stop talking about, behind only Gaster, and he had a few years head start. Des is Noelle's sister, and while she hasn't actually shown up in the game, she's referenced quite a bit. Noelle says things like, "I wish Des could see this." She frequently talks about her memories of them spending time together. It's always in past tense, and there's not a trace of her anywhere in Hometown. We know that Asriel, Des, Kris, and Noelle would spend time together in the past as their families were close, and we have a couple anecdotes about the four of them specifically. A generous reading might suggest that if Des and Asriel are around the same age, maybe she's at university too? But the closer we look, we get the sense that Des has gone missing. We have this scene in Chapter 2 where Noelle freezes up at a spelling bee when the word December comes up, her sister's name clearly causing her some negative associations already. And there's this calendar in her room in Queen's Mansion, which is based on her search history, where every day is December 25th. I don't think she was repeatedly googling Christmas, but rather she's been searching for December holiday over and over, her sister's full name. It becomes even more explicit in the Spamton sweepstakes. One page in the sweepstakes will take you to deltarune.com/December, which gives a fake error page stating this page cannot be found. The page deltarune.com/Des has this image of a guitar, which, when clicked, plays a song called Find Her. And it does sound like that's what Noelle has been trying to do. In Spamton's Q&A, a user called Derpisms asked if Spamton knows anything about Des. He says Noelle has been responding to his, quote, free friend find her emails, asking about Des, but he hasn't been able to find anything about her. That's all we can really say about Des, unfortunately. She's missing, and Noelle seems to be very interested in finding her, but what happened to her and where she is remains a mystery. It's quite a common theory that she may actually be dead and isn't just missing, but there's no real way of knowing for the time being. I do suspect that it may be that we're tasked with finding her at some point in the coming chapters. Rudy is next, with the dubious honour of being one of two members of the Holiday family who actually appear in the game so far. He's in the hospital in both chapters, in Chapter 1 just for some tests, and in Chapter 2 for more tests. He doesn't seem to be doing great. He'll break into coughing fits if he laughs too hard. And while he tells Kris he's doing fine, he seems to be worried about Noelle and a future where he isn't around to protect her. I don't think it has to be said that things don't bode well for the character who, so far, has existed entirely confined to a hospital bed. But we've also got a sense of what might happen with Rudy from perhaps the strangest source, the cancelled Undertale alarm clock. This one's a deep cut, and it's something I had no idea even existed until I was researching for this video. Toby Fox had plans for an Undertale alarm clock app. It was one of the stretch goals for the Kickstarter. It would have featured monologues from various characters shown here. Eventually, Fox decided to poach the app's developer to work on Deltarune instead, and so for Undertale's 5th anniversary, he decided to release some of the dialogue he had written for the app online. Taking a look at Asgore's dialogue, he talks a lot about Rudy, in a way that seems to generally line up with their relationship in Deltarune 2. They met at university, their families are close, and Rudy has 2 daughters, presumably Noelle and Des. In what would perhaps be the biggest bummer for an alarm clock app though, Asgore says, "I was there for it all. His youth, his marriage, his fatherhood. Then suddenly, one day, he fell down. Rudy, I was never able to show you the sun." So Rudy is dead in Undertale. That's a great way for an app to wake you up. Obviously these are 2 different stories, so it's entirely possible that Deltarune's Rudy deviates from this path and makes a full recovery, but I wouldn't be so sure. Despite his confidence that he'll be well enough to go to church tomorrow, I think Rudy may not be leaving that hospital bed. Finally, there's Noelle. She's the member of the Holiday family we know the most about, thanks to her starring role in Chapter 2. I don't think you need me to recap every single thing that we know about Noelle, at risk of sounding like one of those painfully glib 10-hour recap videos. We could talk about her characterization, her crush on Susie, her relationship with Kris, but I feel like all of this is pretty well explained in the actual text so far. So there's really just one thing I'd like to talk about in relation to Noelle. we are constantly bombarded with angel symbolism for Noelle. Multiple characters straight up refer to her as Angel. Her and Des made an angel doll for Rudy, which he keeps as a good luck charm. She fantasizes about growing big angel wings and flying away. Her outfit in the Dark World is literally a flowing white angel robe. In the Holiday 2024 Deltarune newsletter, we have a poem written by Noelle where everyone makes snow angels, and she has the biggest wings. In Chapter 2's Weird Route, one of the requirements is to give Noelle the Thorn Ring, which seems like an obvious reference to Jesus' crown of thorns, which, while not specifically referring back to angels, clearly ties her into the larger religious symbolism all over Deltarune. Father Alvin frequently references the angel as an important figure in the town's religion, not to mention the prophecy explicitly telling us that the heroes must seal the fountains and banish the angels' heaven. And while we're not specifically told what the Deltarune symbol represents in this game, in Undertale we're told in no uncertain terms that this represents an angel, someone who has seen the surface and will come back to the underground to either break the barrier and free everyone, or kill them all, depending on how much of a pessimist you are. Really the glass half full or half empty of prophecies. Back in Deltarune, Ralsei color codes these little triangles to match Kris, Susie, and Ralsei, suggesting it's also a visualization of this game's prophecy, where below we have the heroes and above we have the angel's heaven. What this means for Noelle's character and what role she has to play in the prophecy remains to be seen, but these parallels are not unintentional. We can absolutely expect to see her take on an important role as the story progresses. So there's a lot we should be on the lookout for with the Holiday family in the upcoming chapters. First of all, we should hopefully meet the mayor sooner or later, confirming whether or not she is Noelle's mum. We absolutely haven't heard the last of Des, and I know I'll be on the lookout for any clues as to what might have happened to her and where she might be now. It'll be very interesting to see whether Rudy makes it to church, or if he'll remain bedridden, and whether things play out the same way they do in Undertale's alarm dialogue. And of course, we haven't seen the last of Noelle's angel symbolism. The more we can find out about the prophecy, knowing what the angel's heaven is supposed to be is probably a good start, and the town's religion in general may give us a better sense of what this might be building up to. And we can expect to see a lot more Noelle in general regardless. Early concept art shared by Toby Fox in the past always seems to have Noelle alongside our main characters, so while she may not necessarily join them in Chapter 3's Dark World, I wouldn't be so sure that she'll be totally absent from the chapter. And with that, I think that's more or less everything I think you should know before Chapters 3 and 4 release later this year. Like I said earlier, I know this isn't every mystery we're waiting to uncover in Deltarune. I would love to spend hours talking about the rest of the stuff I didn't get around to, but Toby Fox is a meticulous artist. Trying to unpack every little thing that is mentioned in this game would take forever and probably be pretty boring. But if you think I've missed an important detail or mystery you think people should know before we play Chapters 3 and 4, leave a comment. And if you still somehow don't feel prepared, go and play Deltarune. I made the time to do it while working on this video, and it's always such a treat to come back to this world and these characters. If it's been a few years like it was for me, you won't regret it. But otherwise, enjoy Chapters 3 and 4 when they come out. I'm sure we'll have a whole new batch of mysteries to explore real soon. That was nice of you, watching this entire video. You didn't have to. I spent a while making it, so thanks for sticking around. I want to give a big thank you to my friends Coco and Amy for proofreading my script and helping me refine it. The video you just watched probably would have been a lot more boring without their input. I'd like to give thanks to the channels on screen as well, who I used some footage from in the video, and of course a general thank you to all of the places I used as sources in this video. I've got a page linked below in case you want to go and take a look at any of them. Anyway, the last time I made a video was about 4 years ago, so I'll see you in another 4 years, I guess.